Hello and welcome to Trojan Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Taylor. Today my guest is Steve Flowers, political columnist, political commentator, former legislator, and now author. And that's what we're going to talk to Steve about today. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me.
And as I mentioned, an author. I've got a new book out. Tell us a little about the book.
Well, it's entitled Of Goats and Governors, 6 Decades of Colorful Alabama Political Stories. And that's really what it is, just a collection of political stories which are very colorful. You know, we have a very colorful political past in Alabama. The entire South does, for that matter. You know, the South had colorful politicians. Georgia had the Talmadges. Louisiana had Earl and Huey Long. And, you know, we had George Wallace and Big Jim Folsom. And that's kind of what I wrote the book about, to say these stories that we've heard over the years about Big Jim and Wallace. But my editors, publishers, New South Books, gave it the name Goats and Governors, which is an allusion to Goat Hill, you know, as you know. And then I talk about every governor going back to 1946 when Big Jim was governor, his first term. Of course, you know, history shows that George Wallace was governor about 5 times. Yeah. He was governor most of my adult life, most of my growing up years. So, you know, he was governor a long time. That won't ever happen again. So yeah. He's very prominent in the book. We talk about Wallace and stories about Wallace and stories about Big Jim and stories about Howell Heflin, Bill Baxley, Richard Shelby. I've got rank and fight, just stories you've heard about old guys for years that, you know, Tennyson said facts better than fiction. You know, you can't make up the stuff Big Jim did.
And of course, getting that on paper in a book so that, you know, the future generations will be able to pick this up and hear and see these stories, because eventually some of these stories, you keep saying, they get passed around back and forth, but they're going to go away once people who've been around for them can't tell them anymore.
And that's the purpose I wrote the book for, is I wanted these stories told and saved for posterity, because it's a legendary time in Alabama politics. I try to capture the era, Aaron, too, when the country bands would come to town and people would sit around. That was their entertainment. You'd have bands come in and the governors would come to talk, and you know, it was a bygone era.
And now, you know, in this, you talk about Big Jim Folsom, and you talk about those stories. You can't believe it, you know, almost to the point of legend. You know, but that's the kind of stuff that there's almost a humorous side to some of these stories, and you can pick up a history book and learn who won a race and how long someone was in governor. But hearing the human side of some of these candidates and some of these governors has got to be something that you're happy to be able to share with the public.
It really is. It's something I'm enjoying. And I'll have old readers that have been reading my column for years come into the book signings, and they'll enjoy reminiscing. I've heard a lot of stories that have resonated from this book from around the state. I've had someone call me from different areas of the state and say, well, you missed this one on Big Jim, or you missed this one on Heflin. You know, there's probably been enough to write another book. But I'm not going to do it, but these are enough. But we've had a colorful past, and that's what I tried to capture.
And of course, but it is a piece of history, you know, and it's one of these things that if someone picks it up, they're going to get entertained, but they're going to learn a little about it. Even if they didn't know about Alabama politics, they're going to hear some of these stories and learn something they never knew happened.
Well, and that's true. And you know, actually, we're having a good many sales out of state. You know, I was on a book talk show out of Birmingham or Louisville, Kentucky, or somewhere the other night, and I was sitting there talking about this book like I am with you, and I had callers coming in from Illinois and California and some other, Colorado, who were reading my book. And I thought, well, how interesting, because people find the Southern politics interesting.
And well, of course, in Wallace, you know, within the past year, Wallace has come back into prominence in his role in the civil rights era there. So obviously people are going to want to know a little bit more about what's going on and what went on behind the scenes with that.
Well, it really is. I saw something in USA Today recently where Montgomery, Alabama has the second highest destination point for historical travelers. Behind Gettysburg.
And now they can pick up your book when they go there and check a little bit more history about
Well,
what's going on
funny
there.
you mentioned I'm taking a dozen copies to the governor's gift shop today. They've asked to keep some in their gift shop for tourists who've asked for it. You know, and it is the State Archives Book of the Year, so we've been honored on October 6th with a book signing at the archives. So I'm just glad these stories got told.
And of course, with these stories, and in the book, and if people want to get their hands on the book, you mentioned there briefly, but if they want to get the book, how can they get their hands on the book?
All bookstores in our area have it. I have some that I've given to the Johnson Arts Center here in Troy, but every bookstore in Montgomery has it. The bookstores all around the state have it, and you can get it online too.
Okay.
Goats and Governors.
Goats and Governors. Well, here's hoping that some folks out there who are interested in Alabama politics and political history want to check out the book. They can do so and find an entertaining and humanizing version of Alabama political history. Steve, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you, Aaron.
And thank you for joining us on today's edition of Trojan Talk.